Hatsune NAKANISHI from FUKUSHIMA Zemi. I'd like to thank you for giving me the chance to speak here today. Today I'm going to talk about my graduation thesis. So let's get started. This is the outline of my presentation. Let me start with topic and its importance. My topic is differences in social media marketing communication between Japan and the US. It is important because understanding cultural differences or preferences will be a strength for social media marketers in approaching targets effectively. So what is SMM? SMM stands for social media marketing. It refers to the process of gaining website traffic or attention through social media sites. Social media has become a key pillar for companies worldwide. Let me explain some topic background. According to Statista Research Department, social networking sites are estimated to reach 3.96 billion users in 2022. And many researchers have posed several guidelines for SMM. However, practical tips on SMM communication in light of cultural differences are still lacking. That drove me to examine social media marketing communication tendencies in Japan and the US with a cross-cultural perspective, such as collectivism or individualism, and the different visual perception. For this, I studied official Twitter account of Starbucks, which is one of the most successful brands on social media. As you can guess, my research question is, what are the differences in social media marketing communication between Japan and the US? Let's move on to the next. So I posed 5 hypotheses. Let me go through each of them briefly with a literature survey. Low-context Western cultures tend to use websites emphasizing marketer-to-consumer interactivity. On the other hand, in high-context Eastern cultures, individuals favor consumer-to-consumer interactivity due to a larger distance between marketers and consumers. Therefore, hypothesis 1 is brand-to-consumer interaction is more effective in the US than in Japan, and the Japanese tend to communicate more with other consumers, not with the brand. By the way, individualists like Americans act as an individual rather than as a member of a group, but collectivism like Japanese focus on a group. Next, Japanese people are not as social as Westerners. They tend not to ask questions online too much because it is a sign of disharmony. However, Americans ask questions more freely because they see it positively in low-context cultures. Therefore, hypothesis 2 is the Japanese do not comment on brands' tweets as much as Americans do. Also, there is a difference in visual perception between East Asians and Westerners. Researchers found that East Asians display a wider scope of attention and attend more to contextual information than Westerners, who tend to display a narrower focus of attention and attend more to salient objects. Therefore, hypothesis 3 is the Japanese are more sensitive to visual content than Americans, so visuals are effective in earning consumer engagement such as tweet, retweet, likes, and comments in Japan. Next, in high-context cultures, such as in Japan, websites are more likely to use images to convey information. However, in low-context cultures, they tend to use text. Therefore, hypothesis 4 is Americans do not react differently to the brand's post even though they contain visual content. Finally, Americans use text-based content more frequently than visual. Also, they update their profiles with text-based wall posts more frequently than Singaporeans, who share significantly more photos. Therefore, the last hypothesis is brands posts in the US contain less visual content than the ones in Japan, and they create uniqueness with verbal expression. Let's move on to the methodology. In my research, I employed content analysis and the two-way ANOVA test. I think the process of my research is pretty complicated, so let's explain it more. First, I studied tweets and tweets and replies that occurred in 2020 from the Starbucks official Twitter account in Japan and the US. And then I categorized tweets and replies into each content type, subtype, and reply types. And then I categorized tweets into modalities. Those categories follow the previous literature, so let me explain it more. There are three content types. The first is information sharing content. In this type, Starbucks aims to communicate valuable information to followers. It has 6 subtypes, and this picture is an example of practical tip. The second is emotion-evoking content with 7 subtypes. The main purpose of this content seems to be to evoke positive emotions in followers. Finally, action-inducing content. This type of tweet attempts to persuade Starbucks followers to take a desired action such as purchasing and participating. In the previous literature, there were 6 subtypes, but I added a new subtype as you can see in the highlighted area, customer engagement. This type of tweet are mainly related to COVID-19. So after categorizing tweets, I also categorized them into each modality. There are 4 types. The first one and the second one were coded as textual, and the rest of them were coded as visual. And then I also compared the effectiveness of each content and modality. As a result, I collected 486 tweets in total from Starbucks Japan, but it had no reply data. However, on the other hand, from Starbucks in the US, I collected 303 tweets in total and 1,037 replies from December 2020 to October 2020. So let me show you descriptive statistics of Starbucks tweets in Japan 2020. As you can see in the blue area, information sharing content was the most common in Japan. And also, as you can see in the red area, product intro or promo was the most common subtype in Japan. So how about the US? As you can see in the blue area, emotion-evoking content was the most common in the US. And as you can see in the red area, storytelling was the most common subtype in the US. The figure describes the content type frequency in Japan. As you can see, information sharing was constantly more frequent than others. Let's take a look at the another one in the US. As you can see, emotion evoking was relatively more frequent than others, but the ratio of each content seemed to have balance. Let's move on to the next. This is a content type and modality cross-tabulation statistics in Japan. As you can see, most tweets were visual, 96.3%, and information sharing content appears more likely to be visual than the other two. Also, none of the emotion-evoking content was tweeted without images or videos. Therefore, Starbucks Japan tended to use visuals to attract consumers. So how about in the US? As you can see, there is no big gap in the total number of visual or textual. However, information tends to be visual, whereas emotion-evoking and action-inducing tend to be textual. Therefore, Starbucks in the US uses visuals mainly to promote their product, but they usually communicate with consumers with text. Also, I found an interesting fact in the visual images in Japan and the US. Please look at the pictures. As you can see, the images on Starbucks Japan's tweet created an atmosphere for each promotion object. Therefore, Japanese people focus on the background as well as the main object. These are the pictures in the US. Do you see any differences? For example, on the left side, layers on the drink, it becomes bigger like this, and then it becomes smaller, so that the audiences will focus on the drink itself naturally. Like this, Americans focus on the main object itself. Let me explain the results of the two-way ANOVA test. There are 6 figures, but I will explain 2 figures in each slide briefly. So it shows the interaction effect of modality and content type on the average number of retweets. The blue line means visual, and the orange means textual. As you can see, in Japan, visuals have a significant role in terms of the number of retweets in Japan. On the other hand, in the US, the textual modality is significantly effective in emotion-evoking content. Conversely, visuals seem not to have an impact on the number of retweets in each content type in the US. These 2 figures are the same kind of figures as you saw just now, but it is based on the average number of likes. In Japan, visuals also have a significant effect in generating likes. On the other hand, in the US, the texture has a huge impact on emotion-evoking in generating a high number of likes. However, visuals do not have an impact on the number of likes. Finally, these are the last figures in this presentation. They are based on the average number of comments. As you can see, Japanese people do not comment in general. On the other hand, American people comment more than Japanese, but it does not seem like there is a big gap in the effectiveness of textual and visual. Now, let me explain the reply data briefly. I collected 1,037 replies from Starbucks in the US. However, Starbucks Japan had no reply data. Here is the ranking of reply types and some examples of the top 3 reply types. As you can see, Starbucks in the US communicates with consumers casually in a positive tone. The possible explanation for the reason why Starbucks Japan had no reply data is that on their profile, they say, "Thank you for understanding that we might not be able to answer your voices because only 2 partners are in charge of this. If you have any inquiries about our stores or products, please contact the customer support center." Because of this, some users were solving their problems or questions by receiving a comment from another user, not from the Starbucks Japan. On the other hand, Starbucks in the US dealt with the customers' concerns or complaints with another official Twitter account called Starbucks Care. As a result of my research, 4 hypotheses out of 5 were supported. This is hypothesis 1, and it is supported, and hypothesis 2 was also supported. However, hypothesis 3, it is not clear yet, and hypothesis 4 is also supported, and hypothesis 5 is also supported. In conclusion, my research aims to see the differences in SMM communication with a focus on cultural differences by analyzing Starbucks Twitter accounts in Japan and the US. Japanese people were more visual-oriented, whereas Americans were more textual-oriented. Brand-to-consumer interaction was more active in the US, and tweets in Japan were more about promotion. And there was a gap in posting comments on the brand's post. The Japanese do not comment as much as Americans do. Also, I posed 3 practical implications for social media marketers and managers. First, brands need to focus on visual quality in light of cultural differences in visual perception. Second, brands need to benefit consumers by providing practical tips, and marketers need to ask questions in a poll on Twitter in Japan instead of asking them to comment. And finally, brands need to stay connected with consumers with a tweet in humorous or positive sense and question in the US. These are the limitations in my study. Future research could attempt to examine social media marketing communication strategy not on other social media platforms of another brand to develop this study. These are the references. Thank you for listening.
私は実は、4回生の夏休みの前までは違うテーマで研究していました。それはスターバックスのサードプレイスという概念について研究していたのですが、行き詰まってしまって、このままでは納得のいくまま終わらないなと思って、もう一回見直したところ、留学先の私は2回生の後期から3回生の前期まで派遣留学でアメリカで勉強させていただいたんですけど、その際にソーシャルメディアマーケティングの授業を取っていたことがありまして、その授業がとても興味深くて、で実はその当時からグローバルビジネスのゼミに入るというふうに決めて目標を持っていたので、そのソーシャルメディアマーケティングに切り替えようということになってこのテーマを選びました。それから、さらにその研究していく中でもまたその社会心理学の授業もアメリカで取っていたり、あとは他に文化の授業、文化に関するような授業も取っていたので、そこで学んだ個人主義や集団主義のその文化的な行動の違いとかもソーシャルメディアマーケティングと関連させて研究したら面白いのではないかと思ってこのテーマにしました。私はアメリカのイリノイ州にあるロックフォード大学というところで留学させていただきました。海外へ行くのも初めてで、留学さえも本当に初めてで、日本人、さらに私が唯一の日本人という状況だったので、初めはすごく不安だったのですが、自分から周囲に働きかけて友達をたくさん作って、最終的には15カ国以上の友人を作って、楽しく過ごすことができました。でも、その思い出として残っている中には挫折経験もあって、特にそのアメリカに行って初めの1週間目とか2週間目の授業では本当に苦戦しましたし、頑張って発表しても伝わりにくかったりとか、そういう挫折経験もあるのですが、それがさらに私のその英語力を上げるきっかけにもなって、すごく一回り成長できたので、とてもいい思い出です。神戸女学院で学んだことといえば、まず通訳翻訳プログラムがまず一つ目に思い浮かびます。私はこのプログラムを2年生の後期か2年生の頃から取っていたのですが、そこでは通訳翻訳っていうのはただその言語を置き換えて置き換えるだけの直訳っていうわけではなくて、その元のテキストとか、あとは話し手の言葉を分析してしっかりと理解した上で、その受け手に一番わかりやすい形で伝えるということが本当の通訳翻訳の意味だということを学びました。その通訳においても翻訳においてもやっぱり背景知識であったりとか、あとは自分でその元のテキストとか元のスピーチを分析するためにその背景あるものをリサーチしたりとか、あとは受け手によっても伝え方が少しずつ変わってくるので、そういったリサーチ力であったり傾聴力、読解力、さらにその表現する力などが得られたので、それはその社会でも通用するスキルだと思うので、とても取ってよかったなと思えるプログラムで本当に有意義でした。私は卒業後は商社に勤めます。そこでは英語を使う機会もあるというふうにお聞きしているので、私が通訳翻訳プログラムで学んだように、もうただ訳すだけとかっていうわけじゃなくて、その伝える相手を意識した、コミュニケーション力とか傾聴力っていうのを活かしたいですし、本当にその本当の意味での英語力っていうのをどんどん磨いていきたいと思います。